Hello, and welcome to the Nickels and Dimes Finding Financial Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Kime, and I look forward to bringing you amazing content each week that will provide you with a financial education. It will support you in your financial journey, and most of all, help you to find financial freedom. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Nickels and Dimes Finding Financial Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Kime, and today I'm joined by my friend and one of the most accomplished and dynamic individuals I know, Andre Pennington. Andre's passion and success as an estate planning lawyer and licensed financial professional is attributed to one thing: wanting to do what's right for his family. He didn't have a good family growing up, so for him, family's the most important thing, which is how he can relate best to his clients and their desire to protect their loved ones. Andre and his stunning wife, Amanda, live in Surprise, Arizona. He has 6 children, 2 sons and 4 daughters, ranging from age 3 to 16, and 2 dogs. He rarely misses a family obligation as he believes family is the one greatest gift we can all receive. Andre holds special estate planning training and expertise as an attorney for the U.S. Air Force. His extensive time before the court includes over 75 jury trials at the state, military, and federal level. He leverages his financial services background to enhance his estate plans, making him uniquely qualified to navigate retirement protection, estate planning, and estate administration matters. Andre has high designations from Super Lawyers and Best Attorneys of America for several years running, a ranking on the America's Most Honored Lawyers list by the America Registry, which is an honor reserved for less than 1% of attorneys. He's been recognized as a top-rated lawyer in Arizona, is recognized in multiple publications as a power lawyer, and recently was selected by the Wall Street Journal as 2024's most influential lawyer. Andre, that was a mouthful, but I did not want to miss giving credit where credit is due. You are an amazing and remarkable individual. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor and a privilege.
So, I've got a surprise icebreaker question. I like to throw this out without any warning. So, if you could be any superhero, who would you be and why?
Oh man. Geez. Any superhero. You know what? I'm gonna answer that in a unique way. That's exactly me. I don't know that he's thought of as a superhero, but I would be Darth Vader.
Okay.
I would be Darth Vader. I love Darth Vader's story, his character, because if you follow it, he started out very good and then had things in life happen that he didn't know how to deal with, and confusion, and had a bad spot. But he was able to come out of the ashes, literally.
Yeah.
And he ended up bringing balance to the force, right? He found out who he truly was. And in the end, he was good. So I resonate with that story in a lot of different ways. So that's the answer.
I like that answer. Knowing your story like I do, it's absolutely the perfect answer for you. And I'm a huge Star Wars fan too. So I mean, we'll go with that. I love it. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about your background and your history. Like I said, I know your story. I'm going to let you share it your way here today. But the question is really, and I know it's because of your story, it led you in this direction, but what got you into the legal field, and why specifically estate planning?
Wow. That's a multi-layered question. So I'll try and answer clearly, which I think I'm gonna have to break it into 3 parts. So,
Okay.
What got me into law was this understanding that if I didn't make drastic changes in my life, that was only going to a negative direction.
Yeah.
Right. And what I did is I used the information I had in the moment. I just came out of a traumatizing event, we'll just call it.
Okay.
Uh, I, I was robbed by one of my friends by gunpoint. And I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The aim was at somebody else. But that's when I mean, already I sort of had things going wrong, like people getting hooked on drugs around me and just the wrong things happening, people committing crimes, violence. And that was one of those moments where, hey, I've got to respond to this somehow.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the childish way. And I mean that in the mature way too. You know, the childish part of me wanted to respond with violence.
Right.
And there was this little small voice that maybe I heard loudly for the first time that was urging me to make better choices. And I took what I had and I said, well, I probably need to figure out how to get out of this place. And so I chose the law because I don't like math.
Okay.
Right. Now, it was one of these choices that I didn't actually think could happen for me. But that may have been my first time trying really hard at something that I didn't think could happen. What I learned is if you take one step and accomplish that efficiently, the next step reveals itself.
Yes.
Um, Throughout the course of it, estate planning kind of came in by personal experience. While I was in law school, my grandmother started declining in terms of her capacity,
Okay.
and that culminated in a head-on car collision where the state took over and basically eliminated her estate. And when I started studying my family tree, what I realized is us Penningtons start over generation after generation. And it thought to me a good idea to be different about that. So I
Right.
took it on as a task to be dealt with. So I'm the one in my family.
I love that. I love that. You touched on a couple of things real quick there. Um, that childish or mature opportunity in making a decision. And I want to point on that because I think anybody listening to this has had that point in their life and possibly multiple times. And it sometimes we easily go to the mature decision because we truly have matured through life and we've been through the shit, to be honest, right? Like we've gone there. But sometimes you're literally battling with, and sometimes the childish part is it's not just in your case like reacting with violence, like it's also justified many times to go in that direction. Like nobody would have questioned the way that you or one of us might have responded in that way. But then it's like, can I go another path? And what does that path look like? And for you, that was a huge, drastic decision from what you were facing in that moment with the people that were around you. But it's like, I can go here and really it's justified, or I can go here and I can change everything. And that's why I call you one of the most dynamic people I know, because you you take the hard road. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean, you've been on the hard road with a lot of experiences in your life. You had no choice a lot of times to be stuck on the hard road. But you took that and turned it into what I think is incredibly powerful and said, I'll stay on the hard road, but in good ways, because, like you said, you're the one. I'm going to be the one to do the hard things, to go to law school, to go in the military, to change everything for my last name forever. And you guys will hear more of that message, I know, throughout this episode, because that's just who Andre is. That's how he delivers. Like there's no pretenses about you, Andre, and it's one of the things I appreciate the most. Just that you put your mind to something and you go after it. There's no quit. There's no quit. And it's an incredible example to all of those who have the privilege to be around it and be influenced by it. So also thank you that you are that way. Okay, so that's what led you in that direction. Um, what did that kind of look like though? I mean, you're in the military. Did you go to law school before the military or within the military?
No, no, I went after I graduated law school.
Okay, okay. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure.
So along my path, out of high school, I almost enlisted in the Marines.
Okay.
I was thinking, I the one thing that I will say, I shouldn't say the one thing. My dad is one of the wisest people I know, who had a lot of issues that some resolved, some unresolved. But he made a fair amount of mistakes. And as an adult and as a father, I don't I make mistakes too. I get it. Right. But for me, some of them made it hard to move forward in life
Yeah.
easily. Um, but when I was little, I remember seeing him in a uniform, and I knew that I would wear a uniform one day, and I thought it would be a Marine Corps uniform. Um, but actually, on his advice, believe it or not, I asked him about it after I graduated law school, and I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna join the service." And he was like, "Andre, do you enjoy life?" And I said, "I do enjoy life." And he's like, "Well, if you want to continue enjoying life, why don't you stop looking at the Marine Corps and look at the Air Force or the Coast Guard?" And I did both of those things, and the Coast Guard looked pretty good. But at that moment, I wasn't willing to say I was part of the Coast Guard, so I chose the Air Force.
I love that. I love that. Uh, the funny thing is I'm gonna dig at you on behalf of my son who's a Marine, that, every branch gives each other a hard time about everything. But everything I've ever seen is the Air Force are the ones who got it the best. You got the best equipment, you got the best life, you got the best barracks, all the things. So not that was bad advice from your dad. I actually told Braxton, as a matter of fact, at 9 years old, he told me, "Mom, if I don't get a scholarship to play sports in high school, I'm going to go in the military." At 9 years old. So when he came to me his junior year in high school and said, "I don't want to go to," they had like a college fair, right? At one of the high schools, you go and you see all the colleges, all the things. And the military branches all were set up there as well. And he said, "I don't want to go to look at any of the college tables. I want to go to the military tables and I want to find out about them." And so I said, "Okay." And as a junior, they don't tell you a whole lot. But so I said to him, "I want you to look at every single branch." Because he said, "I want to be a Marine." So I'll be honest. I said, "I want you to look at every single branch." He
Uh-huh.
still, he still went Marine Corps. And then I told him, "Go to college and go in as an officer." And he's like, "No, I'm going to go right out of high school and I want to go infantry." He didn't end up going infantry, but yeah, I mean, so there's something to the other side of being in the military that I think plays into your story and who you are as well. And it's the discipline piece of that. And that is one thing as a single mom raising my son. His dad was present in his life, but his dad lived 1,200 miles away. So even though his dad was present in his life, I was mom and dad on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted for him was the structure of the Marine Corps. And I say all the time, it's one of the best things I think a young man out of high school could do is not to make the military a career necessarily, but the discipline and to see the way my son I thought was pretty mature for his age, but to see that change in him and becoming a man in that kind of disciplined environment is different, right? It's absolutely different. So how did that play into, like, you made the change, you went to law school, then you went into the military, but how did that play into the way you approach the work you do, the way you approach life in general, and kind of what I already touched on, that way that you just go after some. It might be hard. Okay, well, I'm going to get it done.
Yeah, it's a choice. We all have choices to make, right? The way my mind works is I think about it this way. I have one life that I know of, just one.
Right.
And I don't know all the things that depend on me to make the right choices that depend on me to make the right choices today. Now I'm starting to learn. I'm 44 years old now,
Yeah.
right? So I'm starting to learn. I somehow knew this in the beginning, but I said, my kids depend on me before I had kids,
Yeah.
right? My generations from my family line, from my DNA depend on me right now,
Right.
right? And I can do what's been done in the past, or I can make better choices, but better choices almost always carry with them work,
That's
right?
yeah.
And for me, I have a few sayings. One I borrowed from the Marine Corps, but that's just uh, weakness leaving the body. That's what pain is,
Yes.
right? So, you know, I played sports being one of the smaller guys, and you have to be the toughest guy out there just to stay there, right? I grew up a little bit where you had to have some backbone to you, being a smaller guy. If I wanted to be able to walk from here to there without people messing with me,
Right.
right? Which does not always mean being the toughest version of yourself does not mean you're tougher than other people either. You have to be willing to take the lumps,
Yeah.
right? So something in my like when I was younger, it's like I might not be the actual toughest guy, but if I can put up a fight that somebody doesn't want to deal with, at least that, and people are going to leave me alone,
Yeah.
right? So it's just my mindset with things like that. But it's kind of like I use a tattoo as an example. If you want the artwork, you got to go through the pain, right? But once the pain is over and you have the peace, and I mean that both ways,
Right.
right? Then it was worth it. And that's what I've learned in life. And it's one of the things I've just bought into, right? Very few of my days are comfortable. Very few of them.
Yeah.
I probably have the most self doubt of anybody I know that's constantly chirping at me because the voices never leave,
Yeah.
right? I still the tracks that play in everybody's head, if the listeners are being honest with themselves, right? When you're about to do something, there's a voice that tells you can't do it, you're not good enough, you're not skilled enough, you're not smart enough. That voice never goes away,
Right.
but you can still keep moving despite it. And over time, a louder voice starts to arise, and it starts well, I did that, I certainly can do this, right? Talking about being an estate planning attorney and then deciding to go and learn financial services too. I remember specifically thinking that, right? This is a daunting task, but who better than me to learn it,
Yeah.
right? Who better?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's this theme in my mind that is constant, and it's something that drives me in my soul, right? So I don't really I get asked this all the time, like, how do you find the motivation? And I literally don't even understand that question. Yet, as far the person asking me that question also has one life. Where
Yeah.
do you not find the motivation? Like, I think of it like this: people that are unwilling to do some of the things that I'm willing to do, I translate it direct. You failed your family.
Yeah.
You didn't live your purpose and you failed, and a lot of other people depended on you to succeed there, right? If I can't master my emotions and I can't learn how to get out of the childish decisions, I will never make the wisdom and mature decisions that were there for me. And it's a completely different trajectory in life, right? So I'm a human being. Like I said, I hear all the voices. I think the general public would be shocked how often the first thought in my mind is violence. instead of a mature decision, right? Like I'm a brown belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu for fun and for entertainment and for my calm. I I practice disciplined violence and simulated murder,
Yeah.
right? But rarely would I ever stick with that decision, and that's just a choice, right? So it's making the hard decisions.
No, I like that. And I like that you touched on that point too. There is so much about you I see that is 100% around discipline. But I also, one of the things I really love about you is you're honest about your weaknesses too. And I think that I'll say myself, I'll speak for myself. I put on masks a lot of time to hide those things. When in reality, the way I find that power and that strength down the road is I finally take off the mask. Right. And so, you know, my son through middle school, it wasn't the greatest time in his life, but he started wrestling in high school. And I realized that I think it was a huge preparation for going into the military, but it was the place that he could let all that out. Right. He could, I mean, it was in a controlled environment for the most part, but he could go out on the mat and he could let it all out. And then he could walk away and do what he needed to do. And I think that's kind of what you referenced there. But our strength comes from being able to admit oftentimes the weakest things about us. And I say all the time, I recently listened to her name's Jen Gottlieb. She wrote a book. I'm not sure if it came out the end of last year, the beginning of this year, but it's called Be Seen. And it's all about being like truly who you are unapologetically. But she talks specifically about fear in there. And it's one of my favorite things I've latched onto. And when I coach and help other people in financial services or anywhere in life and have the conversation, I'm like, look, the fear will never go away. There is no point that you're going to accomplish enough that it decimates the fear, but you get to choose how much control you give the fear. And she specifically talks about telling fear, I know you're there and you're not going to go away. So I'm going to give you permission from now on to come with me, but you sit in the passenger seat. Don't touch the radio controls and don't speak. You can come, but you don't get to control anything. And
I
I
love
think
that.
I think that really changed my mentality. I think that's what you said too. Like it's always going to be there. Um, and it's whether or not we let it have the control that makes the difference. Um, and I like that you said, more often than not, the first thought in your head is violence. It's okay because it's in your head. It's okay because it's in your head.
Exactly.
But you're also literally you're just very gentle too. You lead with love. You can punch someone in the face with a message, but that message is so filled with love and intent and making a difference. Um, that I think it just resonates. It resonates so much because you deliver it with both. And so with that in mind, I want to lead more into the work that you do. But I want to start super basic for the people that really there's so many people I talk to and they don't oh, I've got a will or oh, I'll get to that later in life. So I want to start super basic. What are the components of a typical estate plan and maybe touch a little bit on the importance. I mean, we'll build on that as we go, but let's just start with the basic of what is it? What does it look like?
Yeah. So um, let's start with the importance, right? Because I think the why is always important. And then we're going to talk about the how,
Okay.
right? But the why is so that you don't fail your family, you
Yeah.
don't fail your loved ones, right? And we spend because of the way society is structured, we spend a majority of our time trying to feel secure. And as part of that, we do our very best on building wealth,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
then you have 75% of the population that do nothing to protect it, and they end up failing their family,
Yeah.
right? So, a basic component. you either you're going to choose a trust or a will. Most of my clients, because I'm in Arizona and because we're a probate heavy state, choose to do a trust over a will.
Okay.
But wills get probated. That's like one of the biggest misnomers out there, that if I do a will, I avoid probate. It is not true. It's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
When you do a will, you get to say who gets what in probate, instead of not having a will and having the state say who gets what. And I'm going to give just a couple random examples that probably are going to surprise a few people. If you're in a blended marriage, right?
Yeah.
And one spouse passes in Arizona, if that spouse that passed has kids, they're entitled to about half the estate, right? Immediately,
Okay.
right? And that's a huge burden, obviously, on the surviving spouse,
Yeah.
right? So it's these things that happen in probate that cause all the issues. And that's one of the reasons it's important to at least have a will. But a trust, think of it as a safe hovering above probate that will never touch probate, that holds all the assets. That's basically what a trust is. It's a contract that we've entered into
Right.
that our assets are held in so that it doesn't go to probate. And in that document, you could say who you'd like to get what and how. When you have minor children, a trust is a better way to go most times than a will. Because if you were to die unexpectedly, the trust can say at what ages, you can even set certain requirements. There's a little bit, you could say the trustee, that's the person that manages the trust. They can pay for living expenses, education, medical expenses, right? So a trust is a little bit more dynamic of a document,
Okay.
um, black and white. So that to me is like the basic structure of the wealth transfer. I look at estate planning in three distinct boxes: emergency situations, which are powers of attorney for finances and healthcare; end of life decisions, we'll get back to that;
Yeah.
and who gets my stuff when I die and how,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And then end of life decisions to me is where the understanding of financial services comes into play. Because, like with my grandmother, an entire life's work can be undone and devastated if the state steps in and starts making decisions.
Right. Right. No, that's a really good point. And, you know, so the listeners have heard my story in different forms and fashions. My parents live with me, and that whole process started 2 years ago. But a year prior to that is when my brother and I found out that my mom had been diagnosed with dementia. And at that point, finally, my brother and I are like, okay, I flew out there and we got out the red folder. So, yeah, you can't see Andre, but he's just grinning right now. My mom
Yeah.
and dad had the red folder. All their documents are in the red folder. And there were a couple of times I'd been out there to visit, and they're like, hey, let's get out the red folder and let's take a look at it. And my brother and I, the truth is, none of us want to think about our parents' graduating life. None of us want to think about ourselves, our kids, or anybody else that we care about graduating life. But every single one of us will. And this experience with my parents taught me to absolutely look at it all very differently. We got that out, we went through it, and I went through the process of setting up their trust, which thank you to you. There was a point you kind of reviewed it for me and made sure that I didn't miss anything and made a couple recommendations. But I then came home and I sat down with my son, who was home on leave at 19 years old. And I said, this is what I do and don't want. This is what I'm setting up. This is what I'm putting in place for you. I only have the one child, and Lord willing, I'll have a whole bunch of grandkids someday. Um, Not too soon, but someday. And so I went through that process because of finally accepting it was time to do that for my parents. And yet it was probably time way before we actually did it. So we then had that conversation in reverse. for what my son wanted. And then we got to work getting all that paperwork done. And when you talked about, minor children and setting things up because the trust can control so much when something like that happens, even for my adult son, he ain't getting it all at once, Andre. I'm going to protect him from himself cuz
Exactly.
I know the times that I could have made better choices when it comes to finances to set my life up differently. And so in my trust, I have it broken down. He gets certain pieces of what he gets, um, financial wise, at different points, at different age points in his life. And then there is a piece that's set up that will carry on from generation to generation to generation. And so I know that's the work that you do with people.
Well, think about that for a minute, though.
Yeah,
That's what I was talking about making decisions and how powerful they are.
yeah,
It's one choice you made to understand wealth transfer, right? And it was probably what, a total of how many hours did we have to spend in that uncomfortable feeling? But you changed the trajectory of your family.
yeah,
You absolutely did. You protected your son from himself. We've all been there making bad choices when we're young.
right.
You've set him up to where he has the best chance of success. And then you went a step further. And then there's something in there that goes generation to generation to generation.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you how rare that is that people do that. And it's a special moment. And we have these surrounding us all the time
Yeah.
if we're willing. And you went through a little bit of pain and
Oh,
you graduate and you said something that was super important. Where did you learn it from? It came from a very painful moment,
yeah.
but you didn't just sit there and just wallow in it. You made sure you had an awareness and an understanding and took action. And the thing that you don't know, and you'll never know, in fact, none of us will never know, but by switching out of that one realm, whenever you, and I love how you said that, you graduate from life, you're going to spare your son so much heartache that
Yeah.
was unneeded by having a plan. And within that living revocable trust, there is a plan for that middle box
Yeah.
that you've selected someone to manage your estate if you can't do it for yourself. And that also saves pain.
Yes.
So, in that little bit that you did, that you said very nonchalantly, that is generation changing. And your son's going to walk into life understanding this piece of it and will likely emulate it, just like your parents planted that seed for you. That's the power of estate planning.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you pointing that out. Um, I didn't really see the value of it until I got into financial services and I really understood the component, or the place that it holds in a solid financial plan. And that's why when that trigger happened, it was step in and get these things in place. And it was hard. It was a really emotional conversation to have my mom and dad tell us what they did and didn't want and be able to share where we felt like we could step in and what we could help with. um that was really hard. But it was easy, Andre, coming back home and sitting down with my son and having that conversation when he was 19 years old, I was 49 years old, and we don't have to have it 20 years from now. I don't want my son to walk around with a silver spoon in his mouth, nor do I want my grandchildren or great grandchildren. But what I do want to make sure of is that they always have a roof over their head, they always have food on the table, and then the extras are up to them, right? I still want them to have see the value in hard work and creating something on their own. um but I don't ever want them to be in a position I was in a couple times in life, and I didn't know how I was going to put food on the table the next month.
Mm,
That's the piece I want to take away from them ever having to face, so they can focus on really creating more and building on top of the legacy that I left behind. So
I
Okay.
love that though. Building on the legacy you left behind. That's very powerful. It does not mean there's no work. It's not mean there's no expectations, but that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're in a universe that's ever expanding,
Yeah.
and that's how it's supposed to go for us too. And that's the piece you did. And it will have the effect that you thought it would. But that's the hard decision.
Yeah. It absolutely is. And on the flip side, I mean, I'm going to use an example from my life on the flip side of when that doesn't get done. Um, I have an uncle that passed away uh, a few years ago. And the question was always asked, do you have everything set up? Do you have the paperwork done? Oh, you know, referencing his wife, I'm not going to use any names, but uh, she knows what I want. She'll handle everything if I go first. Please put it in paperwork. For her, for us, the children are asking these questions. Please put it in writing. Please put it in writing. No, she'll take care of it. She'll take care of it. He passed and she did something totally different. And it was sad to see. It's sad to see in your own family. It's not about the money. It's not about the money. Um, it's about the relationships that got broken because a few pieces of paper weren't taken care of. Because at the end of the day, I'd rather live paycheck to paycheck the rest of my life and have the relationships that matter most than the opposite. Right now,
Perfect.
we know you can have both. If you
Right.
do it right, you can have both. But if that wasn't done and I had to choose, I would choose those relationships every single day for the rest of my life. And that seeing that break within a segment of my family is really, really sad to see. And I know it taught a lot of lessons to a lot of people, and things will be different for people. Um, but that was a lot harder than the conversations my brother and I had with our parents. They were hard in their own way, but that's a whole other level of it. And that's the work that you do to keep families from having to face that when people are willing to come to the table and have the conversation. So now we touched on a little bit, and I haven't really gotten into it, the financial services piece of what you do. Now, talk to me about how long have you had your estate planning practice?
So I've been doing it for about 20 years because I learned in the Air Force, but let's see, what year are we at? So
2024.
it's been about a decade that my office has been open.
Okay. How long has it been that you added in the financial services piece?
I think we're coming up on a couple of years this summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why? What triggered that? Um, I'm just going to leave it at that. What triggered that?
It's funny you asked that question because I was actually talking to somebody today about that actual event.
Okay.
But literally this is event, right? So I'm in my office. You can't see it, but there's a chair right here. I had a client that was 85 years old sitting in this chair. And the reason she came to me was because she was probating her husband's estate. Her
Okay.
husband, I don't remember the exact amount of years in this exact moment, but they were married over 50 years. I do know that.
Okay.
And she was not the one that managed finances. She wasn't the one that made money. She, for their relationship, this was all foreign to her. And I was sitting here thinking the impact of this moment. I have no ability and I have no life experience that would lend to be able to understand it perfectly, what it might feel like to lose your entire adult life and have it missing
Yeah.
a piece of it. And the fear that she was having, and it happened while the market had dropped. I think it was about 20%, and
Okay.
they were on a fixed income. So she's going through expensive probate, can't afford about 20% of her bills. And I was like, in that exact moment, I had somebody who set me up with some solutions that worked very differently. And I was thinking, I mean, this was a while ago, so maybe I'm in my late 30s. I was thinking, how am I in my late 30s not experiencing this market downturn? But this 85-year-old woman in her last chapter of life is. And that was the moment I decided estate planning can be bigger than this. Like if I can figure out this piece too,
Yeah.
then I'll be doubly as good at my profession, right? And it kind of goes back to the things we said before. I am willing to become 1% better every single day.
Yeah.
I'm willing to do it. So I didn't think about how difficult it was going to be. Well, that's not true. I thought about it and I knew.
Yeah.
And I had the fear, but that's where courage comes in. And it's like, dude, you're a smart guy. If anybody can figure this out, it's you.
Right.
Now you just got to find the time. But it was important enough to me that I wanted to help people avoid that moment. Now, I think that's why the whys matter. My why is the honor of my grandmother's memory. I'm not going to waste that pain moment to just feel pain. I'm going to allow it to fuel me to help in that area, right? We've heard of this Gandhi thing, be the change you wish to see in the world. And I'm
Right.
going to get a little bit off topic just for a second. I hope I can round it
Yeah.
back in.
Go ahead.
But all people do is talk. They talk and they criticize. No one does anything. And I'm using blanket statements, but I know it's not everyone, but damn it, it looks like it.
Yeah.
It definitely looks like it. There are so few people who let something come out of their mouth that's a problem, and then they become part of the solution. That's one commitment I've made. Now, I can't solve world's hunger. I can't do certain things. I don't have the skill set to be a pizza delivery boy because my geography, I don't understand it well. I will get lost. The pizza will be late and I will get fired. So I can't do that.
Yeah.
But I can do this. And that's the commitment I made. I'm going to help my clients avoid that moment. And so I learned what I was in. And thank God I had those leaders. And I call them leaders because they guided me to a better place. Instead of saying, yeah, just refer everything to us, they said, you should get licensed. You should learn how to do this. You especially should know this. And and again, that little drop in the water has changed countless of my clients' lives and their families' lives. That ripple effect is now traveling, right?
Yeah.
So back to the original point, how did I get into it? It was that moment. And I didn't want to, I took it on as I don't know this information. So I'm a failure. I just was very real with it. Like, I can think I'm as good as I want to. I have all the awards stacked around my office, and
Yeah.
people tell me nice things about myself. But if I can't get this right, I'm failing my clients. And I refuse to fail. I have to find a way to win. And I don't mean that in a greedy, selfish, egotistical way. I mean, at the end of the race, if I win, people um, survive, people's lives change. And if I lose, I've hurt them. And I take it on as a personal responsibility because that's how I operate.
Right.
But I operate with that level of stress and that weight on my shoulders all the time. And it's the life I've chosen.
I love that. And here's why. One of my things I tell people, it's in my bio. I take the emotion out of finances. So we can have the conversation. I meet my clients where they are and I hold them by the hand and walk in the trenches to help lead them in the direction of their goals and dreams. And that's exactly what you just said that you do. So if I'm going to just circle it all together. Basically, what I feel like you just said is you were in the business of protecting what people had when they were gone. where they wanted it to go, how they wanted things to happen, and avoid probate. What you did in moving in the financial services piece was gave them that same thing while they were still here, right?
Ex-
Secured that for them while they were still utilizing the resources they had, and then have in place that protection, that guidance when they're gone.
ab- Absolutely. I mean, I look at it from a different angle because my base is in estate planning,
Okay.
but saying the same thing in a slightly different way, not only am I helping with the wealth transfer, I
Yeah.
can make sure there's wealth to transfer. There
There,
are so many traditional financial advisors that are unwilling to look at this end of life picture accurately. And I'm not knocking any profession. I'm just speaking what I believe is the truth
yeah.
because it cuts against their paycheck. It's the financial services business is all about assets under management. And some of the solutions that are 100% perfect for someone in the later chapters have nothing to do with assets under management.
Agreed.
And so I'm just an advocate of that moment. And it comes down to a very, very basic principle, which I think estate planning attorneys especially are required to do, which is advise your client on the best solutions to their problem.
Mm.
Don't show them, hey, this is half of it, right?
Yeah.
Show them, hey, there's this half of it. Here's the other half of it. And then the job is to figure out what their tolerance is, what their risk levels are, what they want for their life. You ask this question: would you feel comfortable at this stage of your life if a 2008 event happened? Do you want any protection for that? And nowhere in there did I say, I have to make them understand they need protection for that.
Right.
Their answers are the ones that guide. But that's the question that's not being asked in that moment. And if anybody's listening, I would ask you to think about it right now. Are you at a stage in life where if that 2008 event happened and 40% of your wealth disappeared momentarily,
Yeah.
and it's going to take 10 years or so to recuperate, are you comfortable with that? And if your advisor hasn't talked to you about that and hasn't offered some other solutions for that, find someone who will. Right? But it goes down to being, in my opinion, being a good person and doing the right thing. And if your paycheck decreases a little bit, so be it.
Yeah. That's so important because like our job is to ask the hard questions. Like whoever's listening, your job in whatever it is you specialize in, it's to ask the hard question. It's to challenge the norm. It's to make sure that at the end of the day, you're doing the best thing for the person receiving the service, the good, whatever it might be. Um, it's the difference between transactional and relational.
Yes.
That's what it is. And I tell people all the time, I used to go to,
Say that again.
it's the,
That's so important.
it's the difference between transactional and relational. Do
Can
you,
you explain that?
yeah, do you want to close a transaction to get a paycheck? Or do you want to build a relationship with somebody so that you understand what's important to them and then put in the work to help them make that happen? That's the difference. Like I used to network early on in my business. I would go to the networking events. Here's my card. Here's my card. Here's my card. Nobody wanted to have a conversation there. They wanted to take your card only so they could give you theirs. And I changed that in my business about 2 years ago. I go to networking events where I'm the only person in my seat, because then I know that's the same in every other category there. And I build relationships with those individuals so that when my clients need additional services, I know where to send them. And I'm then benefiting those business owners or those professionals, those experts in their business. And in turn, they do the same for me. It's about being relational, not transactional.
Right.
I'm doing it because I want a relationship with them. I want to help them build their business. I want to help them be successful. I want to make sure my client that needs that has somebody I know and trust to go to. Because at the end of the day, I can send them to anybody, but if that transaction doesn't go well, it destroys the relationship I built. It reflects on me. And so it's the same thing in your work with a client. Do you want to close a transaction and receive the paycheck, or do you want to build a relationship and help that person accomplish what matters most to them? Which means it's going to exist forever. It's going to benefit you even more in the long run. And we still get really paid really well for it.
Yes.
Right. So that's what it comes down to is making it about doing the right thing. We say mission before commission. My
Right.
mission is to educate people on what's available, to make sure they understand how those things work, and then to understand their goals, what's most important to them.
Right.
Give them options, and now they're equipped to make an educated decision on which options they want to implement. And so that's what you're doing. You're building that relationship. You're saying there's more to this than the transaction. Not that your estate plans before were transactional, but there's more to this than what fits in this box.
Right.
That's important and relates to what's in this box. And in that experience you had with that client, you were able to recognize what that was and identify an opportunity to go after that. Um, and change things completely. You doing that, you coming into the world of financial services created a connection for me being on the financial services side first, of making sure that while I don't draw the trust, I'm not the attorney, that is a component that always gets discussed with my clients. And I'll connect you with somebody that can do that piece of it. But it needs to be done. It's important to have it done. So
Right.
that being said, when you approach estate planning, where should people start, or when is the best time to start?
The best time to start is now. I'm gonna use a couple of different scenarios, right? So every year I go to the PTA and I do a talk, not because I know business is not coming from it, but I think it's still a message that needs to be heard. If you're a parent, one of the things that we have to think about, I think it's a basic bare minimum requirement, is if something happens to me or my spouse or the other parent, what's going to happen with my child? What are their experiences going to be? Right. And this is the message I always just want to deliver to young parents. If your children are old enough to remember, and this happens, you call it graduating life in an unexpected moment,
Yeah.
that'll be one of the worst days of their life forever. And if you don't have anything planned, the next thing that's going to happen is the state's going to step in and take them into custody to add on to that worst moment. Now, I want everyone to stop and think about what happens when the state comes in and takes a child into custody. When you think about foster kids, group home kids, and the stories that they talk about, is that where you want your child to go? And then they're going to make a decision amongst all the people who may be willing. There could be fighting, right? This is now the trajectory we're on, as opposed to, I've said where I want my child to go. That's what a will is good for. Whenever you do a trust, you do a will because it's the only document that says that with authority.
Right.
The other piece I want to talk about is we talked about powers of attorney for our parents. What about our children? What if we're in an accident? Do we have the document that says where they go? Are they taken into state custody again? Right? What about an 18-year-old who goes off to college that you're paying for as a parent and you want to call up to find out about grades? If you don't have a power of attorney for your child,
Yeah.
you don't get to know that information. Right? And think about these little things, right? If I find out that my child is struggling in school, I can say something about it, or I could find out after the failing has already happened.
Right.
Right? So I'm using that as a scenario, right? Then we have the scenario of what you talked about, right? The only reason that you were able to avoid having to go to court is because of the red folder.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the start of that journey is a process through probate court while you're alive, while somebody's alive to get the authority. What was your question? I completely forgot it.
My question was, where should people start
Oh,
and
where should people start?
when to start? So
So the
best
best
time
time
is
to
now.
start is today. If
Yeah.
you don't have an estate plan, the best place to start is today. And the number one thing when selecting a professional to do this, and I tell my clients this to their face, even if it's to my detriment, you have to be comfortable with the attorney or the professional that you're working with because it's not transactional. And when you have questions, you're going to go back to that person in potentially an extreme time of need, right? And
Yeah.
the other thing you have to have is 100% confident that the professional that you've chosen knows exactly what they're doing. Now, I believe I'm the best. I really do because I know the effort that I put in. I know that I'm getting 1% better every single day. I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm still getting better, right?
Yeah.
But the reason I say that is not every estate planning person is equal. It's a very easy place to hide out in because your client doesn't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And I do believe that it's extremely hard to be extremely good at it. So here are the questions I would ask. Does your firm do administration? Do you do administration? Have you done any of the litigation when people are fighting and arguing? Right? Do you have a fiduciary services company? When you combine all that together, not only do you understand the law of estate planning, but you understand what it actually looks like in administration. And then we also have a fiduciary services company. So we actually manage estates for people like your parents that have outlived their support group, their
Mm.
support system. That's going to give you a well-rounded view and it will help emphasize the importance of what you're doing in a moment when you're writing it on a piece of paper, what it looks like it means 10, 20 years down the line. So you want to get someone who you have comfort with, they're experienced, and because of that experience, you believe they know what they're doing. And I use this story all the time. I had a 95-year-old client of mine come in, maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. We meet every year, and I would say, hey, there's going to come a time that I'm going to ask you to step down on your estate and just let the person you selected manage it for you. Well, if that person doesn't have comfort with me, if they don't believe I have the experience, or they don't believe I know what I'm doing, they might not follow my advice. And that would be detrimental to my client. Right. And that's why it's important, those pieces. And once you find somebody like that, then they're going to guide you through exactly what you need based on your goals. So the best place to start is right now. It's a super important thing. I don't look at it transactional at all. My clients reach out to me for a myriad of things, and I usually can get them to the right place. Or if I can't, I'll do the research and help get them to the right place,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, I appreciate you pointing out those questions to ask, because I think that, if you're like, okay, I heard this podcast and they said the time to start is right now. So, okay, I'll go sit with an attorney. But what you just said is interview them. You're the
Interview them.
client. You're the one in charge, not them. You're not obligated to move forward with that first person you sit down with. So interview them and see if you get a sense of comfort. And if not, interview somebody else. This is the most important thing that you can do. Make sure you're set up at the end of life. Make sure your family is taken care of and protected the way that you want. And you need to remain in control, and you need to have a sense of comfort in it. That's what I heard from what you just said. So I appreciate you going into that detail with a little bit of extra guidance. You also answered, really, my last question was, what advice do you give to somebody that's questioning it? I feel like you just answered that with a couple of those scenarios. So as we wind this down, Andre, any final thought you want to share?
Yeah, the one thing that I think I didn't talk about that I was feeling like was important was price.
Yeah.
Do not select an attorney or a professional based on the price. Just because it's expensive does not mean it's good, right? I live in Arizona, and we can go to Scottsdale and pay 3 times the amount for anything we want to. And on the converse side of that, um, just because it's not expensive does not mean it's bad. But I have clients that call into my office. I'm a sitting judge in the probate section, which hears all the trust stuff, all the will stuff, and they'll call in and just ask about a price. That is the wrong way to start this process.
Yeah.
What I would pose, and I don't pose it to my clients because it's not the right place, but I will pose it here. This is talking about all the wealth you've accumulated, and we're talking about how we're transferring it in the very, very, very best possible way. Price should be the last factor. And I'm not advocating that because I'm the most expensive in the world. It's the question we hear the very, very most. And you don't get something for $500 or $1,000. I
Yeah.
have a whole section dedicated that fixes that after that person passes. And I just leave it at that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you going there. I did have that as a bullet point up higher in my question, so I'm glad you circled back. We went in a different direction, and I didn't circle back on that piece. So it is important. Like, find that connection with an attorney that you feel like cares about what's most important to you, can lead you on that path, and then figure out what it's going to cost. I like, you get what you pay for.
Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. That's what I'm saying in this arena.
But in both directions, right? You get what you pay for. Sometimes when you get with the right person, maybe it's not as expensive as you thought, and you get the absolute best job. And sometimes you pay more to get the quality, but at the end of the day, it should be about the relationship first and the cost second. This isn't an area people want to go in looking for the discount price.
This is not where you want the greatest bargain of your life and sacrifice the effectiveness of the plan. That's the point I'm trying to make,
Yeah.
right? This is a place that you want to have absolute confidence that exactly what you wanted is going to happen in the future, and be working with a professional that is equipped to be able to see all of those areas, right? And
Yeah.
some of the questions: how long have you been doing estate planning? Do you have any financial services licenses? Do you work in tax law? Those are some good questions as well.
Yeah.
Because you want the person to be the most knowledgeable in this area, because you can make a decision today that's horrible when you die.
Yeah.
And you can make a decision close to death that ignores an entire component of the next thing that may happen to you. And you want someone that's going to be willing to have you explore all of them. That end of life piece. Now, I tell my clients, we're going to make some decisions today. Doesn't mean I'm not saying they're going to make the right ones. But we're going to look at the hard stuff and we're going to make a decision if we're willing to talk about it or not. And you'll decide how deep you want to go into that. Talking about the things that you look around, see happening to everybody else, but we believe they're not going to happen to us.
Right.
Do you want to plan for that too?
No.
Right?
Yeah, you absolutely do. You absolutely do. And I appreciate those additional questions. I think there's so much to this. We're probably gonna have to circle back and go. As you're covering these last couple things, there's more questions I have on my mind. We'll have to circle back and go add a few things to that. I think in the future. So we'll definitely do not a follow-up episode, an additional episode to dive a little bit deeper. But Andre, I'm super grateful that you took the time to be here today. I think this topic is absolutely so important. And while people do not talk about finances, as we know, the way they should in their families or even out in the world, in ways that you can get help and information so you can start asking questions, they don't about this either. I don't think it's that people don't know it exists. They just don't want to deal with it. We talked about it earlier. It's the hard thing, but my challenge is have the freaking hard conversations now so you can take a deep breath and enjoy making memories and spending that valuable time knowing that all of that down the road is taken care of. It's not something you have to circle back to when you're in the middle of a health crisis or something like that. It's already taken care of. And then on top of that, it's the peace of mind too, to just know that what you want, like I said earlier, for generations to come has been put in place. And the controls are there to make sure that it happens the way that it should. So again, thank you so much for your time. My big call to action today is if you don't have your financial house in order and your legacy secured, I hope this conversation has made you understand how important it is and that it has to start right now. You have to start moving in that direction. So if you need help in getting started or putting together your legacy plan, please reach out. Andre is in Arizona, but he has an office of attorneys that are licensed in different places. And the one thing is he can give us information of people we can connect in other states if he doesn't have somebody that can help. So definitely reach out. We can help with that process. But most importantly, help make sure that your family's secure and your loved ones are protected. So thank you all for listening today on the Nickels and Dimes podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Kime, and I look forward to continuing to bring you amazing content each week that'll educate you, support you, and help you to find financial freedom. So until next week, stay safe.